Okay, right. Welcome to lesson 16 of the Russian Revolution Guide. And today we're going to look at an event that takes place in 1921. And it's a pretty big deal. It causes a huge shift in approach from the Bolsheviks after the Civil War. So the Civil War is finished. It's been won. The Bolsheviks are in charge. And during that period, they introduced something called war communism, which I've looked at before, and it was this idea that the state controlled everything. They were in charge of telling workers which factories they had to go to. They sent people out to the fields to take and seize the money that they had and the food that they had and bring it back to the cities. And this was the system they had, but it was beginning to go wrong. Okay, if we look here, we've got the conditions for many Russians were beginning to get worse. Bread rationing was cut. People's freedoms to talk freely were being taken away. The Bolsheviks were arresting thousands of people, taking them away, sentencing them either to death or to imprisonment in the sort of Siberian gulags, which is like the kind of the labor camps that they had up near the Arctic Circle, where conditions were horrible and lots of people there died. And there was no court, there was no jury, there was no fairness in the system. That was taken and dragged away. And this was the kind of Russia that the Bolsheviks were creating, okay? Harsh, not enough food. And it wasn't really what people were hoping for. And to make matters worse, there was almost this new class of people beginning to emerge, which were the Bolshevik leaders, or the bureaucrats in charge of the communist economy. These guys were giving themselves and their families more food, better housing, better privileges. You know, they were living quite a nice life. In fact, they were living a life pretty much like the bourgeoisie or even the czarists kind of element, people, class that the whole point of communism was to get rid of. And it's like they'd replaced the capitalist elite with a communist elite. And so this wasn't really what people were expecting. And it comes to a head in 1921 in the Kronstadt Naval Mutiny, where Kronstadt's a huge naval base. It's where the main Russian fleet is based. It's not very far away from Petrograd. And what was important about these guys is that they had been very, very loyal communists right from the beginning. In all the revolutions, they had supported the revolutionaries. They had worked with the Bolsheviks. I mean, many of them were Bolsheviks. They helped the Bolsheviks get rid of the provisional government. They helped the Bolsheviks shut down the Constituent Assembly, remember, which is the thing that really kills off any idea of democracy. And so they were there. They protected the communists. These basically were the core of the Bolshevik army for a long, long time. And now suddenly they're turning against Lenin and against the leaders, and they say, this is not what we signed up for. This is not the kind of communism we were hoping. And so they mutiny and they refuse to follow orders. So what does Lenin do? Well, he raises an even bigger army of Red Army soldiers, 50,000 of them to be precise, and they march over the frozen plains as he attacks during the winter. The mutiny happens in February, and in March he attacks, early March he attacks. And at this time in Russia, the rivers and the sea, basically the sea outside the naval base, is still frozen, solid. And so this army is actually able to cross from Finland across the sea and attack the naval base directly. And fighting there goes on for several weeks, and thousands of people are killed. Eventually, over 8,000 of the sailors escape, and 500 are captured and then executed for mutinying and disobeying Bolshevik orders. So it doesn't work out well for the poor old sailors of the Russian fleet or the Bolshevik fleet. But they do have an impact on the direction that Bolshevik Russia takes. Lenin realizes that this is serious. Like, the sailors were his most loyal supporters, and now they have turned against him. So even Lenin now knows something's seriously wrong with the way that he's running things. And if he carries on like this, he could lose, the whole country. The Bolshevik Party, the communist project, could just fall to pieces if the sailors aren't on board and the workers aren't on board. And there's not enough food getting to the cities, so he knows something has to change, and that's what he does. He gets rid of war communism and he replaces it with something called the New economic policy. So, questions for you to answer today, please. Explain why the sailors at Kronstadt mutinied and the consequences this had for Russia. And then on the next slide, 2 Pika paragraphs again, please. Explain 2 consequences of the mutiny. So, have a go at those. Please use the sentence stems, sentence starters to help you. Okay. Next lesson, or next module, next video, we look at the new economic policy. See you then.